Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining in on the weekday. I know it's difficult to take time out. And more than that, thank you, Ayon, for joining in late evening from Malaysia, from Kuala Lumpur. It's a great privilege to have you here. I don't think Ayon needs any introduction to this group because most of us are following him on LinkedIn, and every day we are reading his blogs. Something Ayon actually was thinking that when we read your blogs on LinkedIn, and somebody who doesn't know about you has not seen your LinkedIn profile would never connect you or have a perception about you that you come from sales. So how are these two separate, different personalities? Like, and then more when they find out about you that you are author of 4 books which are not related to sales, which are related to more of a life. It's really very interesting way of understanding about you or looking at the way you look at life. So having said that, but still you need an introduction, a short introduction. So for everyone and for anyone who doesn't know about Ayon is a B2B sales leader at a Asia level. He leads the sales at GE Wind Energy, and he has around 20 years of experience in starting right from consumer sales, going up to capital equipments, and he has been successful in whatever he has been doing from the sales perspective. And today, as like our theme, we would be understanding or we would be discussing with him on the deal strategies and those strategies which are driven by pricing. So Ayon, coming back to you, the first question I have, or before even I ask my anything to you, is there anything you would like to add or share about yourself which we don't know?
Thank you, Mr. Majumdar, for the very kind introduction. And hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody who is tuned in. So my name is Ayon, as Mr. Majumdar said, and two quick disclaimers before we go to the question. The first disclaimer is I am obviously not an expert on pricing or on anything else per se. I am just a sales guy who's been around for 20 plus years across various industries. I can just offer my humble, learnings from the street, and maybe I would also look forward to learn from the participants in this show. So that's the first disclaimer. And the second is, I am here on my personal capacity, so sometimes my views might not necessarily reflect those of the organization that I work for. So it's more of a personal viewpoint that I'm going to express to whatever questions Mr. Majumdar asks. So with that, yeah, we are ready to roll.
Okay, that was a very humble start for yourself. We know, Ayon, who you are and what you stand for, and what level of intellectual thinking you represent to your blog. Your blogs are representative of your intellect and your thinking. So very kind of you. So kind of you to be so humble here, of your humility. Really appreciate your humility. So my first question to you and to any sales person who I talk to is that what is the strategy, and to any successful sales guy, is that what is the strategy you follow for closing sales at a very profitable price and without leaving any money on the table? Because these are two very difficult situations for a sales guy. Either you close the deal profitably, or you give out a discount and get the sales out. Okay. So how do you manage in closing a profitable deal with a profitable price and make sure that you don't leave any money on the table?
Thank you, Mr. Majumdar. This is a very pertinent question, probably to start a discussion on pricing and selling. So, because we've always been taught, and in our formative years, that the money on the table is a big question, which we always, think when we go for any deal closure. And so, before we get to that, there is a first ground rule that, as a salesperson, I have understood across the industries that I've worked in, that I think that there are primarily 3 triggers on both sides of the table, the selling side and the buying side. And these are the three triggers you need to figure out very early on if you want to get the maximum out of the table. So these three triggers are need, greed, and fear. So both sides of the table are driven by either of these three triggers, and you need to understand very well as the sales team what is driving the person on the team on the other side and what is driving you, and that sets the tone on whether or not you drop the anchor, because dropping the anchor is probably the next step in this discussion, because there are different schools of thought to that. So one school of thought says that you should never drop an anchor in a negotiation first, because once you drop an anchor, you are gone, because you'll be held up to that. And the other school of thought says that no, you should drop an anchor, because once you drop an anchor, you define the boundary condition within which you're going to play. So there is no right or wrong way, but from my trial and error learning, what I have understood is that it depends on two primary factors whether you drop the anchor or you don't drop the anchor. The first is, what is the market in which you are playing? So you need to understand the background of the market. So for example, if I have to give you one example, so say I have worked extensively in Korea, for example. The Korean clients I have seen, they opt for always a win-win kind of a situation. So in those kind of markets, it is okay to be transparent and drop an anchor to lay out the kind of boundary where you are going to play within that. So that's fine. But there are other parts in the world, in Asia especially, where dropping an anchor could be dangerous, because once you drop an anchor, you are held for the price, and then the features keep getting added within that price. So it's better don't drop the anchor in those markets, and you need to understand that. And lastly, of course, it depends whether you are selling a product, a solution, or a service. So if you are selling a product, for example, which is a box inside which there's a feature, advantage, and benefit, it's okay to drop an anchor, because you can define, because the price of a product cannot vary too much. But when you are selling a solution or a service, it's probably not prudent to drop an anchor, because that's where you keep on adding the features and benefits as the discussion goes along. And in the end, you kind of add all that has been agreed on, and that's where you decide on the price point. So don't drop an anchor if you are selling a service or a solution. That's my understanding. Do your homework very well, because you need to understand the budget of the customer. If you want to take all the money from the table, then you have to understand the budget, and it's not always linear on your face. You don't always know the budget. So you have to do the background investigation, the customer's customer, what is the surround story, what is driving this purchase. So is it a need or a want? So is it a must have or a good to have for the customer? Is it a government regulation that the customer needs to meet within a stipulated timeline? If there's a deadline there, or they can do it, it's just one of those fancy items which they want to buy. So those decide whether, and those things you come to know only when you do the homework. So and after doing the homework, you have to slow down and listen, because, normally in sales negotiations, we try to talk and pitch more than we listen. If you listen deep, you will get more verbal cues, non-verbal cues, and you will understand what is the trigger, what is the urgency, what is the budget. Those things you will get to know. Another important thing on understanding the negotiation room climate is that there are three kinds of people on the other side of the table. And I borrowed this analogy from Chris Voss, who is a very famed FBI hostage negotiator. So there are three kinds of people on the other side of the table on any negotiation. One will be an accommodator, one will be an analyst, and one will be an aggressor. So an accommodator is basically, as the name suggests, that they are the nice people who are like, who bring in harmony to the teams, who order lunch, and who try to make the atmosphere congenial inside the room. The analysts are the CFO types. They'll be crunching the numbers, going around corners, and trying to derive a logical conclusion from all the data that's lying on the table. And the third is the aggressor. And normally most buying companies put the aggressor as the face to the sales team, because the aggressor is, their only job is to soften the other party. So they'll be very aggressive, intimidating, and they will try to soften you down. And one ground rule is that never antagonize the aggressor once you have spotted him or her, because the aggressor, once you antagonize an aggressor, you are in trouble. So because then it becomes a clash of egos and you are held to a price, etc. So how do you not antagonize an aggressor? It could be various things, right? Like your body language, you need to be more amicable, etc. But more than anything, one thing which works is that avoid using the why question with an aggressor, and use more of what and how questions. because what and how are open-ended questions which are more collaborative and consensus building. And a why question is an invitation to a challenge, and nothing kind of turns on an aggressor more than a challenge. So if you challenge an aggressor, he or she is going to take it up and you make your life miserable and hold you to a price. So never ask a why question. And then don't rush to close, because we salespeople, we always think that there's a deadline, and if we miss the deadline, then we'll miss the deal. And customers are very crafty these days, and not these days, always, and they know the ways. And sometimes you'll be in situations, I have been personally in situations where mega deals, we've been at the last leg of the negotiation, and we are sitting inside a conference room, and they have invited our main competitor, and they are sitting in the next conference room, and there's a parallel discussion going on. So all these tactics will go on to create pressure on you. Don't succumb to those pressures, because deadlines are negotiable, they're man-made, they're stretchable. So don't, as long as there is dialogue, and dialogue doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be verbal dialogue. As long as somebody's emailing you, texting you, deal is still on. So don't be in a rush to go in there. And finally, I borrow this from Brian Tracy. Sometimes you have to sign a deal and you still are not very happy with the kind of margin that you are extracting from the deal. You can use something which is called doorknob close, which is basically when you're walking away after signing the deal, metaphorically walking away, I mean, and you turn back, and then you throw in a new feature at the customer's team saying that, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think that you want to add this on your vanilla purchase? So basically, this is something which you offer at a higher margin, which increases your average. So sometimes it works, because what happens is the customer's sales resistance is very low at that point. After they have signed the contract, everybody's happy, the dinner is done. So you can throw in, and doorknob close helps to up your margin. And the final point I would say, and this is probably a contrarian point, and I have learned this from my Chinese friends, is that sometimes in life, you need to leave money on the table. Because after any complicated and a long negotiation, customers normally suffer from something which is known as a buyer's remorse. So we all suffer that, right? After we made a major purchase, and we feel that we've been taken for a ride, or we didn't negotiate enough, etc. And we in sales, we always celebrate those superstar alpha male sales people who come and tell us stories that, I took the customer to the cleaners. This guy had $1 million budget and I got $1.5 million out of him. So never do that, because once you can take a customer to the cleaners only once, and then that you will never be invited next time. So avoid doing that. Rather, leave some money on the table. Let the customer feel good about the negotiation. That ensures that your door is open for future negotiations. So these are some of my rustic street lessons learned from the street, which I hope will help some of your viewers.
Definitely, Ayon. Very valuable nuggets. And these nuggets can, even though you quoted Chris Vox and you quoted Brian Tracy, and definitely these are not going to come from those books. These are going to come from the streets only. And somebody who has been there, who has gone through that, would realize and know that. And so thankful to you for sharing that with this team, typically, which is more of a back office team or support team to the sales team. Okay. And one of the challenges for this team is to understand what's happening at the sales side on the customer side. And for them, the only representative in front of the customer is their sales team. Okay. And this team also, and as we discussed, as you said, shared, that customers are driven by the need, greed, or fear. And ultimately, the solution which they look for is what is the value that solution brings to them to meet that need, greed, or fear, overcome that greed, fear, overcome that fear. And ultimately, that value is driven by certain drivers, value drivers, okay, within the organization, which basically the customer uses to measure and quantify the value. Okay, am I getting this or am I not getting this? And the salesperson, and this is certain things. These are certain things which are happening with the salesperson. At times, I have seen that the salesperson actually creates those drivers that you can measure it something like this. You see, this will happen like this. So the client actually takes that as an anchor for the value. Now, that anchor for the value or that value driver if that value driver is known to the person who is creating the solution or who is articulating the solution as a proposal writer, as a proposal author, that increases the value or it makes the proposal much more compelling and connected with the client, because ultimately he's going to read that proposal. But somehow that value or this communication with the sales and between the pre-sales and the others who are supporting in building that proposal doesn't happen, or it gets lost in those Chinese whispers. How do you think we can solve this conundrum?
Very pertinent and important question, and this we hear of this at all the time. So let me start with a real life example. So in one of my earlier assignments, where I was kind of just above frontline at that point in time, and I was a sales manager, and we were incentivized for selling. So we were held up for revenues, for weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual revenues. Then there was another group of people who were the product managers, who owned the margins for the product lines and the segments, etc. And then there was a finance team which owned the cash, basically, the debtors and overdues, etc. So funnily, all three teams were not aligned with each other in terms of how they were doing their work. So for example, as a sales manager, my only objective was to go and sell. So I didn't care about the margins. So I would go back to the product managers and ask for ridiculous prices, because I just wanted to do my numbers. And the product manager in turn would say that, no, I'm not going to give you the number, because he or she is held up for margin. So he or she will refuse. They will say that, no, I can't give you this kind of a margin, because this kind of a number, because it is below my allowed margins. And the finance person will not release your invoices, because they will be saying that, you get this much of my debtors to this level, otherwise I'm not going to release the invoices. So basically what used to happen is that 28 days of the month, this drama would continue and no sale would happen. And on the 29th and the 30th day, all hell will break loose. And then what happens is there would be pressure would coming up from the top, and then all product managers will drop their prices. And even the market understood that in the last 2 days of the month, they're going to get the price. And the sales managers were very crafty. We were very crooked at that time. We used to know that, we wait to the last day and they're going to give us a price. And the finance managers will also release the invoices. In a sense, what would happen was that the quality of the business suffered. So, and then there would be debtors peaking, blah, blah, you name it. And then material return and all that stuff would happen. So to solve this, what they did, the management did, was that they started swapping people between roles. So, people like me, they were made into product managers, and then product managers were put into sales. And then they understood the pain points. So that's where you have a real price discovery, which is basically a co-owned process. So we need to agree, as pricing and commercial teams, we need to agree on a set of questions that defines the kind of pricing that you want to do. And pricing can be of different types depending on which market you are in, which stage of your market maturity curve you are working in. So it could be competition-based pricing, it could be cost-plus pricing, it could be high-low pricing, penetration pricing, project-based pricing, premium price, whatever, you name it. So you need to understand what is the pricing trigger for a particular deal, and that's an outside-in information which the sales team has to bring into the pricing team. And the pricing team, in turn, needs to also provide the levers for the financial model to the sales team, that they need to work on the geographical nuances, what are the operations costs, what are the inventory carrying costs, what are demand fluctuations in the market currently, etc., etc. So basically, they both own it, and when they come at a consensus on that, that's where they define a common business goal. And the business goal has to be very important, because both parties have to have the same business goal. So a company can have just a few straightforward business goals, right? It can be either profitability, it could be cash flow, it could be penetration, or it could be increasing market share, something of this sort. So once they agree that this is my objective, business objective, the path becomes much easier, because it's a collaborative process. And then sales also feels responsible. They also feel that they also own the pricing and the margins, instead of somebody else owns it and I'm just going and selling it. So it has to be a co-owned process, and hence we should also avoid conflict in incentivizing, because I have seen sometimes in conventional large organizations where there will be a set of people, like 80% of your sales force will be selling the conventional stuff, which is your bread and butter. And then there'll be 20% of the people, the kids around the block, who will be selling the fancy stuff. And when deciding the incentives, many organizations do this. They, for the conventional ordinary Joes, they just have a very regular kind of a flat drab incentive scheme, whereas the people who are selling very small amount of fancy stuff, they get incentivized at a very high steep rate, and this creates a mismatch in terms of what is the company aiming for. So that needs to be fixed, because you need to understand what is driving, what is paying the salaries for your employees, and you need to incentivize that properly. So that's very important. And sometimes, another thing I can share is that you need to also study your competition's pricing model, because most organizations are very internally focused. Our pricing is entirely, on these are my triggers, my factors, my levers, and I make my pricing according to that. Sometimes you need to study what your competition is doing. And again, I'll give you an example. In one of my earlier assignments, we used to do this. We used to call it war rooms. So where we used to have 7-8 people inside a room, and each person would be owning a certain company, like one of our competitors, and they will try to pitch the offering to the others, and others will rip it apart in that. And it was like a 45-minute of a rigorous workout where you will, get into each nut and bolt of the offering and, pull it apart. And that's how you get to understand the layers of your competitors' pricing, and you discover things which probably your competition themselves don't know. So that sometimes helps. And, you need to do that. Also, keep an eye on tangential competition. Sometimes what happens is you might not even know what is hitting you. So, for example, I was working in the lighting industry. We didn't know that it was the system integrators who were hitting my margins. So they were tangentially, encroaching on my market, and I was competing only with the other linear lighting companies. So this happens sometimes. And one final probably thing is, and I've used this once, one of my managers, used to be a big fan of this, is when you go to a new market, when you are originating from a different part of the world and you are going to a new market, you cannot draw the cost plus method in that market. What you have to do is you have to come, which we used to call it, is a price minus. That is, you decide a winning price for a project in that market. Say, for example, it's $10 million is your give and take 2 or 3% here and there. And if you have to win the project at $10 million, you peg the price there, and then you work back on your costs. So you go back into each sub element, into your vendors, your logistics, your, everything else, and then you work back to make that price work. So sometimes instead of starting from the cost and ending at the price, you should start from the price and get back to the cost. So this helps sometimes, especially when you are in new markets. So these are some of the kind of top level, things which come to my mind when you to answer your question. I don't know if I answered it properly or not.
No, definitely. These are really great inputs, and I agree that business wargaming, what we call, that's basically when you simulate and we do some sort of that in our black hats, what we also call as the black hat strategies, black hat reviews on the proposals. Yeah, those are really something which help in getting the competitors' perception, and of course the market, understanding the market. But as you closely said that ultimately work, and that's a great example of top-down pricing, that is, take a price and then price minus that. But ultimately, whatever price you come to, it has when it comes to when you look at it from the client's perspective, it is either a perceived value by the client. It has to, that price has to align with the perceived value of the client, or it has to be a value the customer is willing to pay. Now, you have to see both these dimensions. The perceived value, what is he looking at, what value, and what is he willing to pay. Now, how can you help, or how do you really get to know which way is he going to swing? Is he going to swing to the perceived value, or is he going to swing to the willingness to pay? That this guy is not going to pay any one dime beyond this value.
So price versus value, this is the elephant in the room, right? Whenever you discuss pricing, this always comes. So let me start with a funny anecdote. So I used to, and the same example, the lighting industry where I used to work, and one of my colleagues was selling a high bay fitting to a cycle manufacturer in North India. High bays are basically those bell-shaped fixtures, if you've noticed, which are, they are installed in rows in factory ceilings, and they light up the factories. So this guy is selling a high bay luminaire luminaire to this gentleman who is a very renowned bicycle manufacturer in Punjab. And the manufacturer, he observes after listening to Bhatia, he asks him that, tell me something, my bicycle has got 500 different parts, and I just charge $1,000 for it. And your highway luminaire has got, and he speaks this in rustic Punjabi. I don't know it, so I can't probably do that, but I'm paraphrasing. And he says that your highway luminaire has got just 3 parts, and you ask for 4,000 rupees for it. So explain the maths to me. So Bhatia, he was a very street smart sales guy. So he immediately, without batting an eyelid, he says that, sir, I am very bad at maths. I can't do the maths for you. But tell me something, can you light your factory shed by hanging a bicycle from the ceiling? So the customer burst out laughing. He understood the humor in it and he gave the order. So this is probably the most simplified version of a value selling, right? So a value is, what is value? Value is basically a perception of the solution to a problem that the customer has. And your price needs to be a story that matches that perception. So, you can, no matter how much you sell the virtues of a comb to a bald guy, I mean, it's of no meaning because, he doesn't have a need for that comb. So you don't try to sell a value where the other person doesn't see a value in that. So always have, whenever you are going on adding features to your offering, you need to have a 3-step, we call it FAB in sales, which is called features, advantages, and benefits. So every step, do a FAB check on what you are offering to the customer, and then you pitch. Because we often hear this in commercial organizations and in commercial teams that never sell on price, go and sell on value. Somebody is booming from inside a cabin. And these remind me of those bosses inside those glass cabins who have actually never gone and sold anything in their lives. Because you can, this sentence should not be never sell on price. The statement should be never sell on price alone, because quality, performance, and the rest of everything that adds into your value story can only offset a portion of the price, or they can neutralize a portion of the price, but they cannot substitute price as a decision trigger in your buying process. So no matter what is your value, how much valuable your offering is, you cannot sell it at 5x the market price. And suppose accidentally, or if you are lucky enough to do it at sell it at 5x, you will be doing it for the last time, because that's the last time they're going to invite you in, and you're going to get kicked out of there. So never try to overestimate the this value thing that you can only sell on value and price is not important. Price is very important. So they have to meet. So where do price and value meet is that which I call as middle ground. Basically, what is the middle ground? Then middle ground is definitely middle ground is something which is not in the middle. It's not a geometric middle. So middle ground is any negotiation that you go into is a series of compromises. So you let go of something from your side, and I let go of something from my side, and then we arrive at a sweet spot in the middle. And then what happens is the second step, which is more important. After that, you throw in something which is outside of the black and white contract draft, and I throw in something outside of the contract draft, which is your share of generosity, my share of generosity. That's how trust is built between two parties in a negotiation, and that's where you get an actual middle ground. So that's very important to arrive at the middle ground. And then I have to come with the disclaimer in the end, because as salespeople, we often, what happens is we think that no, if we are constructing something nice and theoretically nice for a customer, it must be a very nice, valuable story for the customer. It's a great value prop. I will quote Subroto Bakshi in one of his book. He gives a nice example, and I always love this example, that he tells that he described a typical rural India scene where you've seen those gypsies, right, who walk on tight ropes and who jump through the fire loops and all those. So he says that there is a gypsy who is sitting by the roadside and with all his wares spread out in front of him, and he's not doing any performance there. He's just sitting there. And there's a man who is sitting at a distance, and he is just watching the gypsy from a distance, and he's waiting that when the gypsy will go start his hoop loops and jumps, etc. And after a while, the gypsy gets irritated. He gets up and he looks at the man. He says that, tel tambaku tera, dekh tamasha mera. That means, it's there are a lot of free riders out there in the world, and who will make you do all kinds of value props, all kinds of simulations, homework, and exercise, but they have no intent of buying. And the poor sales guy keeps thinking that, or the sales lady keeps thinking that, they are doing a lot of value prop exercises for the customers, but in the end they get nothing. Or sometimes there might be customers who might have all the right intent, but they might not have the budgets to do it, budgets to buy it. So qualifying the customer is extremely important, because once you have the right customer who has a genuine problem, and there is a solution to the problem that you have pitched the customer, and the story of the solution of the problem matches the perception of the problem of the customer, that's where you arrive at a sweet spot. And that's where the customer, the value, and the price, they all intersect. And that's where you get the right value prop. And we always say that customer is always right, customer is always right. Probably this is not always a right statement. I think only the right customer is right. So find the right customer, given who has the right problem, and you have the right solution. That's where everything goes right and all are happy. So I don't know if that answers.
Great insights. Great. And your honesty, you're very honestly sharing the experiences from the because these are not boxed suggestions from the self-help books or the books. These are experiences which I can relate to them, because these are experiences. What you're sharing is experiences. There's no gyan from those boxed books. Okay, so let me take a break over here and see if there are any questions from. Okay, no, there are only comments, and people are saying about it. They loved the fab features, advantage, benefits, and excellent insights. So everyone is echoing with me. So thank you, everyone. Maybe it's time that we have some questions from the participants. If you have any questions for Ayon, or else we can just move to the next set of discussions we have. Anybody can raise up their hand or just unmute themselves and ask.
Abhijit, this is John. I work as a bid manager. Hi, Ayon. Thanks so much for coming onto this webinar. Really insightful. One thing which we always face, right? I mean, especially when we get into the opportunity qualification stage, which is a first phase in our entire bid process. One of the questions to the sales guy is, do you have a price to win? Okay, so it's basically telling the team that, look, the customer has a budget, or there is a price that the customer is expecting. Okay, now I think almost all the times the answer that I face is no, I don't have a price to win, right? So you come back with your estimates, we'll see what the price is coming to at that time, and then when a price arrives on the table, right, from the estimations, then they will say, oh, this is too high. Okay, you need to bring it down. So what exactly is the reality? Is there a price to win in the minds of the sales guy right in the beginning, or is there truly no price to win in his mind?
That's a very, very important question. I agree, and I can empathize with you. Somebody who is at your place. So this is a very tricky situation. So, and I also empathize with the sales guys, because frankly speaking, sometimes they can be crafty when they say use this, because they will try to see that if his wish price is say $100, and he will see if John can give me it at 90, and so he has $10 in his pocket for negotiation, his or her pocket for negotiation. So that could happen. But sometimes they don't know what is the budget, and that is really a problem. And sometimes they have to bounce off the price, and then they come to know that this is high or low. But mostly, for example, if you're where you are selling, for example, if it is a government tender or a public sector tender, you will always have a budget there, because that is mentioned there, that that is the ceiling of that. And normally government tenders have got a cushion on the budget. So for example, if you see, and it depends from country to country, but generally they have a buffer of around 20%. So if you have a 100 rupee budget on a certain purchase, so you can make sure that the purchaser on the other side will want to close it at 80, because he or she will want to peg it that I didn't use entirely my budget. So in government tenders, it is easier, relatively easier to understand what is the budget, although whether or not, because everybody understands that. So then it becomes tricky because your competition also understands that budget. In private, as I said, the price discovery has to be a more consultative and a collaborative approach between sales and yourself. And sometimes, I don't know if in your organization you can join the meetings with the customers when there is an initial discovery session. If you can join the meeting and you can have a discussion, you can get a lot of clues on what the customer is willing to pay. And as I said, the willingness to pay is a function of the urgency of the purchase also. So if it is, if their backside is on fire and they have to do something because of the government regulation, they might be willing to stretch their budget and they get approvals very fast, even if that's a public sector. And when they are at a luxury, so they are planning something for the third quarter of next year, they don't care. So that at that time they will, play hardball with you. So sometimes it is better as a pricing expert if you can be in the meeting with the salespeople and both of you together ask the question. So it happens, two things will happen out of that. Is that one is you will get a first-hand perception, and second is the salesperson also feels that you are on his or her team. So you are doing it together. So co-own the price discovery. I think that helps. But I know it's easier said than done. I can sit on a webinar and give you gyan on this, but in reality it could be probably more complicated. But this is the only way you do it.
Great, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much,
John, for asking a real. I can say that out of the 15 participants in this, all 15 will basically will be able to relate to this because everybody goes through that. So anybody else has got any question? Please before ask the question, because so that we can move to the next round. Okay, I don't see any questions. So well, we talked about price discovery, and we talked about pricing strategies and all things. Now, at times, the customer themselves, as you said, the customer is smart, and the customer meets. If we may meet one customer in a day, but the customer may be meeting 5 vendors in a day. Okay, and the customer, they have their own tactics of they have their own incumbent vendor. They may like to continue with the incumbent vendor, but then they may like to see that if they can squeeze the incumbent vendor to give them some concession, because the incumbent vendor on the contract renewal is going to, as per the contract clause, is going to increase the pricing by sometimes by a X factor. So how can the sales team help? And of course, now maybe that account is with the account manager, but still the sales team, how can they help in the renewal of a deal? First thing is that without opening the door for the competitors, because the customer will always be always saying that no, the contract is coming for renewal and we should invite other vendors to see if there is any, and it may be a totally run the business application, and everybody knows, the customer also knows, and you as a vendor and other vendors also know that there is no innovation coming in, there's no transformation happening, nothing is going to change over here. Okay, everything is going to remain the same for the next period of time. But since they want to lower down the cost, or rather they may say, because when I hear from the procurement teams, they say is that when you started the project, the requirement of the project was that the person who is maybe, for example, a help desk, who is supporting the help desk has got 3 years of experience. Okay, that was the need at that point of time. Now it is 2 years which is gone when you have been doing, and the same person is there, and now he has got 5 years of experience. So you must be paying him up 5 times at the rate of a 5 years experienced guy, and you're charging me that, whereas I need only a 3 years experienced guy. Okay, how are you? And that is the reason why you are asking me for this price hike. I can understand that. But I think I can go ahead with the others who are offering me a lower price, and maybe a better, maybe I will get some fresh ideas also from them. So in that case, in that situation, how can the sales help in increasing the chances or executing an increase in the price in a renewal deal without opening the doors for the competition? So you have to manage two things here. You have to get the deal renewed. You have to execute the price increase, and at the same time, not let the competition enter into it. And I have seen sales guys do that, but I know I just wanted to understand from you, like what are the strategies they do follow to do it, because they never share that. Because this happens is that the deal is done, because as a pre-sales guy would hear, don't worry, the deal is done. We are going to we will be doing it for the next 2 years or next 3 years, but we never get to understand how this deal happens.
Great question. And I totally agree that, this is a very real question and real life scenario. Honest confession, I don't have an experience in manpower services industry. So I'll probably not be a domain expert on that, but in generally, I can talk of services renewal, and, they can probably they are more or less universal, what, at least to my humble wisdom, what I see. So it all boils down, your question is, renewal, a customer comes back to you, and the basic thing which drives a renewal of a deal is customer centricity. So, and what is customer centricity? It is a very amorphous term, right? It means different things to different people. So for some people, it could be consistency. For others, it could be lowering expectations and exceeding them and doing some stunts. And for others, it could be raising the expectations and delighting the customer. For some, it could be fixing things which are broken, including trust. And for others, it could be preventing things from breaking, including trust. So it depends. And the best of the lot, what they do is they co-create a new experience with the customer. And that's where it is the most liberating, and the renewal becomes the easiest. So customer centricity drives all renewal. So firstly, of course, as we all know, the common sense part of it is that if you want to renew a contract, you have to execute your existing contract very well. Because if you've screwed up in your existing contract and you have a lot of complaints during the currency of the contract, your chances go down. Obviously, this is obvious, right? So you have to clean up your messes before the due date. Don't do it at the last hour. Do it, at least till 20% time still remaining within the previous contract. Do it then. Engage with the stakeholders well in advance before the renewal comes up, so that they don't feel that you're just coming there to renew the contract. Technology companies, especially, they always are taught, and we always used to work on that business model in my formative years, at least, to lock a customer in with your technology, because that you have an IP muscle, and you lock the customer for a long period of time, and the customer has no kasht se maar, we used to say in Hindi. So the customer has no other option. The poor customer, he's stuck with you. But in today's world, in an information free world, you can't sustain that kind of a business model for very long. Sooner or later, somebody will find an alternative and you'll be kicked out. So you need to be very sensitive on that. So basically, you have to give the customer all the freedom and all the options, but you have to treat the customer so well that they don't exercise those options. So that's the trick of renewal of a services contract. So, a very crude example, I grew up in small town India, where we used to have just one cinema hall in the town. And, they used to play all shoddy movies, but we had no option. So we used to go every weekend to watch the same movies in the same theater. And then one day, a second theater came up. And then soon after, a third one and a fourth one came up. And soon, in a couple of years' time, the first theater was closed down. It shut down because it could not sustain the competition anymore. So it's the same everywhere. So sooner or later, the next cinema comes along. So don't take a customer for granted. Then keep showing up in off season, because normally, we are, as service providers, we just show up when there is a crisis or the customer is looking for us with a machine gun, and only then we show up. But normally, if you show up in off season, you give them timely inputs, technical inputs, or whatever other inputs that that are helpful for them. You help them with their inventory planning, with their day-to-day kind of working. You help them with industry trends, educate them with industry trends, equip them with the right red flags which could happen in future. These are things which build trust between a customer and a service provider. And once you do that, it doesn't remain business anymore. So, it becomes like it's an obvious next step that they will obviously, renew your contract. Then when you come to value, and you mentioned this, Mr. Majumdar, in your question, that, when it's the 3-year person versus a 5-year experienced person, and it's the same, whether it's a person, it's a human being, or an offering that you are giving, it is basically a function of the risk. So there is a certain risk that that you are willing to take on behalf of the customer, and that risk is monetized. And how you share the risk, that depends. So a 3-year or a 2-year experienced person will bring to the table a certain value in terms of a very crude example. You are putting a 2-year experienced person facing your incoming calls for the clients, versus you put an experienced 5-year person facing. The 5-year experienced person knows a lot more the right answers to give to a client. And by hiring, just by an incremental revenue spend on a more experienced person, you can probably save much more business from going away from your door, because the new person probably might not be able to handle it. So value versus risk is how much risk you are able to take. So if the customer is willing to take the risk of losing business, so that's his or her call. Sometimes you need to be also a reluctant seller, because always, if you are in a hurry to close the contract, the customer feels, oh, this guy, this company is in a hurry. That means, they are very, very desperate to close the deal. Sometimes you should walk away. Instead of, customer is asking you for a 2-year renewal, you say, no, 2 years is too much. Maybe 6 months is good. And we'll see after 6 months. So then they feel instantly their antenna rises up. Anything that is scarce becomes valuable. So they say, no, you have to lock in. Then they go for a 5-year renewal. So sometimes you have to be a reluctant seller also. That, it helps. Include all term, and while doing that, of course, you are not cheating the customer or conning the customer. While you are upgrading a contract, while you are renewing a contract, make sure that you are including all that is possible in terms of upgrading your offering in the renewal, in terms of features, versions. If there's a software, you improve the versions, give them the best high-end thing that you can give within the price that you have quoted to them, so that they don't feel left behind their competitors or peers, because your job is to make them competitive in their market in front of their clients. Subscription models sometimes help when you are doing tech. So, revenue sharing models, you can spread out the risk, spread out the revenue across the period of the contract. Use open book pricing. In COVID, this has happened quite a lot, because, there are some elements in your contract which are probably not your own. You are also buying it out and, plugging a margin on top of that. Sometimes just let go of those, open your books in front of the customer, show them that, for example, sea transport during COVID hit, exorbitant kind of rates. So many companies did that. They opened up their books and they showed it to the customer that, dear customer, my sea transport is this much, and I am charging an overriding margin of 10% on that. If you want, I can let go of that. You please take the sea transport on your account. So that helps, that creates a lot of transparency and trust. And then prevent, sometimes, sooner or later, most customers will try to go into a self-perform, or they'll find an alternative that, why can't we do it ourselves? Why do we need the service provider? So, which is okay. I mean, everybody has a freedom to do that, but it should not happen at the cost of quality of work, because we've seen it in the industries that customers do a premature self-perform transition. And when they do that, what happens is, one is, they damage the assets, because they are not, their people are not trained enough. They just crudely, they just shadow your people, and they just try to learn the tricks and do it themselves, and they damage the equipment and the assets. And secondly, they can cause health hazards, safety hazards at sites. And we've seen this, when companies suddenly going into self-perform, they can't manage a complicated capital equipment, and there is a safety hazard. So if there is a transition that needs to happen, it has to be phased out and done it in a proper manner. And lastly, you mentioned smaller competition. They'll always be there, those mom and pop outlets. And with no disrespect towards the term mom and pop, it means that the smaller outlets who are a small overhead, they will compete with you. Sometimes they are good. They are very sharp, small outlets. Sometimes they are not so good, and they are just playing on price. So if it is a price game, it's best to walk away from them, because they will, they can't sustain. Because whenever it's a price, value versus price, when you are doing a threshold, always fall back on a threshold of value instead of falling on a threshold of price. Because price, if you sell on the cheapest, then your quality, sooner or later the customer is going to be in a mess, and then they will come back to you after and then they'll never go away from you. So sometimes when you're caught in a price war, just walk away. So I think these are some of the things we can keep in mind for renewal of existing contracts. And I don't know if it answered your question in terms of
definitely. Yeah, lots of valued inputs in there, and I think that brings us to the last question as we approach this insightful session and engaging session. What do you see as the future of sales?
future of sales. Sales is the oldest profession in the world. I don't think that sales is always it's a recession-proof profession. It's going to evolve as times go by. It's going to become, the tools and tackles might change, but some things will remain universal. In a salesperson's kitty, whether you are selling a piece of a software or whether you are selling a nuclear plant. So basically, the same things remain. So as I mentioned, customer centricity. You need to solve your customer's problem. You have to be your customer's best friend, and it has to be a win-win. Selling doesn't mean that you sell at a loss, and all good customers and qualified customers understand that everybody is in there for their own profits, and it's okay. I mean, it's okay to earn your profits from a business, and that's why business is there in the first place. So it's not a dirty thing. Many people think that the sales profession is a game of cons and things like that. Nothing can be further from the truth, because any endeavor in this world, whether it's technology or it's a non-profit, it's a political agenda, or anything you name, unless your idea is sold to the right audience, idea remains an idea. So basically, the salespeople are the prime movers of the society. They keep the wheels of commerce going. And if somebody says, some people say, oh, you are a sales guy. So I always tell them, yeah, but if you are not a sales guy, then unfortunately, I am sponsoring you. Because, some salesperson somewhere in the world is sponsoring everybody else who says that he or she is not a salesperson. Because whether you're in HR, in production, in marketing, in procurement, everybody is doing selling, because selling is a transfer of emotions to get to from point A to point B, and that's how human civilization moves forward. So if you are not into selling, somebody is sponsoring you.
Great insights. And actually, you remind me of Daniel Pink's "To Sell Is Human." So yeah, that's a basic thing. Thank you, Ayon. And I think we need to see if anybody has got any questions. If not, then anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I see a lot of.
Ayon just joined one more question.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if it will be relevant to you. Have you worked with bid managers in any of your sales careers?
Of course, in all my sales roles, I have worked with bid managers, John, because a salesperson's job is very incomplete without a bid team with them. So I don't know what is the context of the question, but if you ask me why,
so my question would be, I mean, what do you think, in your experience, is the most value contributing area, from a bid management perspective, between sales and bid management? As a team, you focus on your sales side. What is it that you would want a bid manager, to focus on, or what is the best thing that you think, if that bid manager would have done that, it would have been good for me?
So, John, we recently, a couple of months back, we did an APMP seminar on bids and proposals. So I think this was discussed at length there. So I will probably share that link with you. You can go there, because we don't have that much time. But in a quick nugget, if you want. So bid managers are definitely, they are not a support function per se. They are a complete end-to-end collaborator with a sales team. So never feel that you are just a support function who is just to do a certain task which the sales team has given you. You have every right to ask all the questions, and that's your primary job. A person who has all the answers is no longer valuable in today's world. A person who has all the right questions is very valuable in today's world. So make sure you are asking all the questions in the right manner to the salesperson, and ask all the uncomfortable questions also. And that's how you bring your insights. That, do you think that this is going to work? Do you think? And a salesperson is normally is unidirectionally driven. They just want to go and close the deal. They might not see around the corners, which you can. Sometimes you can bring inputs because you are doing an end-to-end. You have more technology inputs, technical inputs. You have inputs from contracts, legal. Bring those points to the table. You can say that, hey, do you think that if I put this in the proposal, will the Will it fly? Do you think the customer has money for this? Do you think, yeah, this cost is very high if I go to my standard vendor? Do you think I can go to an external vendor and challenge my standard vendor and get it down? What do you think? You are saying the price, target price is 10 million, and do you think that we can close it at 12 million? What's your idea if I try to make a value prop like that? That's how you, and the sales guy will immediately, his antenna will be high. If you are telling that instead of 10, you're getting 12 million. So these are the kind of inputs. Never feel that you are just a support function. You are his partner, his or her partner. So please ask questions, give your inputs.
Great.
Thank you so much, Ayon.
Thank you. Thanks, John, for the question.
Anyone else? I can see a lot of kudos coming in the chat, and I think, but nobody has got any questions. So with that, I think we are approaching the time. And thank you so much, Ayon. Ayon, would you like to add something about your books over here? I think that let us hear something from your other side. This was too much of sales. Now let us hear the human side, that part of Ayon.
No, my books are nothing. They're very humble, things is just scribbles and compilations of scribbles. So they are basically, I thought, a couple of years back that we Indians are very bad at documenting our journeys and our heroes. So I thought that because I'm a daily blogger, so, and I was always curious. While Indians are very well documented in terms of a Satya Nadella, Indira Nooyi, and Sundar Pichais of the world, but there are a lot of Indians pegged at middle and senior middle management who are lead very invisible lives. They do their work and they disappear into the sunset, and their stories are never told, never written. So I thought, why can't I be their cheerleader? So my books are basically standalone articles, compilation of standalone articles which sit on overlapping boundaries of work and life of every man. The people you see in the subway, the participant in those conference calls that you are part of all day, the business traveler in an airport gate, those people. So my stories are all about that, and I feel that life and work are not watertight compartments. They overlap, and all my articles and stories are about overlapping articles on work and life of every man like ourselves, and that's what those books came about, sir. And nothing great. They're very humble offerings.
Definitely. You can understand what is in those books by following your blogs or articles or even your posts on LinkedIn. So everybody here, please do connect with Ayon on LinkedIn if you are still not connected, and you will get your real good dose of thinking differently from Ayon every day, at least most of the days. Thank you so much, Ayon, and thank you everyone for participating. And Ayon would like to have you whenever we like to have you. Please be our guest and share all these valuable insights with you. Thank you so much.
Very kind of you to have invited me, sir. And thank you all the participants. It was lovely talking to everyone. And thank you for all the kind words. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Abhijit.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.